Every civilization has a story that explains why order exists and why chaos never truly disappears. For ancient Egypt, that story did not begin with pyramids or pharaohs. It began with a murder. A brother who betrayed a king, a throne stolen through deception, a body cut into pieces and scattered across the land. This was not just a myth meant to entertain. Ancient Egyptians believed this event shaped the balance of the universe itself. The conflict between justice and betrayal, order and chaos, life and death, all of it began here. And according to Egypt's own sacred texts, this was the first great betrayal in history. The story of Osiris, Isis, and Set is often told as a simple legend, but in ancient Egypt it was something far more serious. This myth explained why kings ruled, why the dead were judged, and why Egypt believed order had to be defended every single day. Osiris was not just a god, he was the model of the perfect ruler, a king who brought law, agriculture, and balance to the world. Isis was not just his wife, she represented loyalty, intelligence, and the power to restore what was broken. And Set was not just a villain, he was chaos itself, violence, disruption, and betrayal given a name. This myth appears in Egypt's oldest religious sources, including the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom, the Coffin Texts of the Middle Kingdom, and later temple inscriptions that priests treated as sacred history. Pharaohs did not just believe this story, they ruled because of it. Every king was seen as a living Horus, the heir of Osiris, ruling in a world where betrayal was always possible. In this episode, we are not retelling a myth as fantasy. We are uncovering the story that ancient Egyptians believed explained power, death, justice, and survival itself. Because to understand Egypt, you must understand the first betrayal and the god who refused to stay dead. This is Beyond Time. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and hit the like button if you are seeking the truth. In the earliest Egyptian religious texts, Osiris is not introduced as a distant god of the dead. He is introduced as a king who once ruled the world of the living. According to traditions preserved in the pyramid texts and later temple inscriptions, Osiris governed Egypt during a mythical golden age, a time when order was established and chaos was pushed back. He was remembered as the ruler who taught humanity how to live like a civilization, not like scattered tribes. Osiris was associated with agriculture, law, and justice. Ancient Egyptians believed that before his reign, the world was unstable and harsh. Under Osiris, people learned how to cultivate the land, respect divine law, and live within Ma'at, the principle of balance and truth that held the universe together. This is why Osiris was so closely connected to the Nile's fertility and the cycle of growth and renewal. His rule symbolized stability, prosperity, and continuity, the very things Egypt valued most. What made Osiris unique was not power, but legitimacy. He ruled not through fear, but through harmony with the gods and the natural world. In later funerary texts, Osiris becomes the ultimate judge of the dead, but this role comes directly from his earlier image as a just king. He was believed to understand truth because he had ruled according to it. In Egyptian thought, only a ruler who embodied Ma'at in life could judge souls in death. This is why Osiris became the model for every pharaoh who followed. Egyptian kingship was built on the idea that the pharaoh was the living representative of divine order on earth. When a king ruled well, he was said to be like Osiris. When a king died, he was ritually identified with Osiris himself. This belief appears repeatedly in royal funerary texts, where deceased kings are described as becoming Osiris in the afterlife. Osiris's importance also explains why his story had to end in tragedy. A perfect ruler alone does not explain the world the Egyptians lived in, a world filled with death, injustice, and betrayal. For order to matter, it had to be threatened, and so, within the sacred tradition, chaos entered the story through Set, Osiris's brother. The stability Osiris created would soon be tested by envy, violence, and the first great betrayal. This moment, the transition from harmony to disruption, is where myth becomes explanation, because for the ancient Egyptians, the murder of Osiris was not just a divine drama, it was the reason death existed, the reason kingship required constant defense, and the reason Mot could never be taken for granted. And this is where the story turns dark. In ancient Egyptian belief, chaos did not arrive from the outside, it was born within the divine family itself. Set was not a foreign invader or an unknown force. He was Osiris's brother, a god associated with storms, deserts, and disruption. In early Egyptian religion, Set was not purely evil. He represented necessary but dangerous forces, strength, unpredictability, and violence, elements that could protect Egypt or destroy it, depending on who controlled them. According to traditions preserved in the pyramid texts and later temple inscriptions, Osiris governed Egypt during a mythical golden age, a time when order was established and chaos was pushed back. He was remembered as the ruler who taught humanity how to live like a civilization, not like scattered tribes. Betrayal, not battle, was the most dangerous threat to order. Osiris was not defeated because he was weak, but because trust was violated. This idea appears repeatedly in Egyptian wisdom literature, where internal disorder is seen as more destructive than foreign enemies. The murder of Osiris became the ultimate warning about what happens when chaos disguises itself as loyalty. Set's violence did not end there. After retrieving Osiris's body, Set dismembered it and scattered the pieces across Egypt. This act symbolized the fragmentation of order itself. Egypt, once unified under Osiris, was now broken. For the ancient Egyptians, this explained why death existed, why the land could fall into disorder, and why unity required constant protection. In religious thought, this murder was not just a past event, it was an eternal threat. Every drought, rebellion, or invasion was seen as an echo of Set's act. Chaos was never fully destroyed, it was only restrained. And with Osiris dead, the responsibility of restoring order would fall not to strength alone, but to intelligence, loyalty, and perseverance. This is where Isis enters the story, and with her, the possibility that order can return even after betrayal, even after death. With Osiris destroyed and Egypt symbolically broken, the story could have ended in permanent chaos. But ancient Egyptian belief never accepted chaos as the final state of the universe. Into this silence stepped Isis, not as a warrior, but as something far more powerful. In Egyptian religion, Isis represented intelligence, devotion, magic, and the unbreakable will to restore Ma'at. Where Set used force, Isis used knowledge, and knowledge, to the Egyptians, was the highest form of power. According to funerary texts and temple traditions, Isis refused to accept Osiris's death as permanent. She traveled across Egypt, searching relentlessly for the scattered pieces of his body. Each location where a fragment was found later became a sacred site. This was not a coincidence. The myth explained why holy places existed across the land. Egypt itself became the body of Osiris. His death was woven into the geography of the nation. Isis was not alone in this task. She was aided by her sister Nephthys, whose mourning cries appear in ritual texts recited during funerals. Their lamentations were not just expressions of grief. In Egyptian belief, sound itself had magical power. Words spoken with correct intention could alter reality. Through mourning, Isis and Nephthys began the process of restoration. Once the body of Osiris was reassembled, Isis performed one of the most important acts in Egyptian mythology. Using sacred words and rituals preserved in later funerary spells, she temporarily restored Osiris's life. This was not a full return to the world of the living. Osiris did not come back to rule Egypt again. Instead, he was transformed. He became the first being to cross into the afterlife and rule it as king. This moment defined Egyptian views on death forever. Death was no longer annihilation, it was a transition. Osiris became the model for every deceased Egyptian. Just as he was restored through ritual, so too could humans hope for rebirth through proper burial, spells, and moral living. This belief appears repeatedly in the pyramid texts, where the dead king is directly identified with Osiris. But Isis's role did not end with restoring Osiris. Through her union with him, she conceived Horus. This detail was critical. Horus was not born into peace, he was born into conflict. His very existence represented the future of order, threatened from the moment of birth. Temple inscriptions describe Isis hiding Horus in the marshes of the Delta, protecting him from Set's attempts to kill him. This part of the myth resonated deeply with ordinary Egyptians. Isis became the ultimate symbol of protection, a mother guarding her child against chaos. Amulets, spells, and statues of Isis nursing Horus were worn for thousands of years, long after the pharaohs themselves were gone. The myth moved from royal ideology into daily life. As Horus grew, the cosmic conflict shifted. Osiris ruled the afterlife, Set represented chaos and destruction, and Horus stood between them, the living embodiment of rightful kingship. Every pharaoh was believed to be Horus in life and Osiris in death. This cycle explained continuity. Egypt survived not because chaos disappeared, but because it was constantly challenged and restrained. In this way, the myth of Osiris, Isis, and Set became more than a story. It became a blueprint for reality. Life, death, rebirth, betrayal, justice, all were explained through this divine drama. The Egyptians did not ask whether the myth was true in a historical sense. For them, it was true because it explained how the world worked. And this belief shaped Egypt for more than 3,000 years. But one final question remained. If chaos could never be destroyed, how could it ever be controlled? That answer comes with the rise of Horus and the divine trial that decided the fate of kingship itself. The story of Osiris, Isis, Set, and Horus did not end with a victory parade or the complete defeat of chaos, and that is exactly why it mattered so deeply to the ancient Egyptians. In their worldview, chaos was not something that could be erased forever. It was something that had to be contained, managed, and confronted again and again. The myth taught that order survives not because it is stronger, but because it is constantly defended. Horus eventually confronted Set in a series of divine trials described in temple inscriptions, especially those preserved at Edfu. These were not simple battles of strength, they were legal disputes, tests of legitimacy, and symbolic struggles over who had the right to rule. This detail reveals something essential. Egyptian kingship was not based on raw power, but on rightful order. Horus wins not because he is more violent, but because his claim aligns with Ma'at. When Horus is declared the rightful king, the cosmic balance is restored, but Set is not destroyed. He is pushed to the margins, associated with deserts, storms, and foreign lands. This final detail explains how the Egyptians understood their world. Chaos was always nearby. It surrounded Egypt, just beyond the fertile land. Civilization existed only because it was carefully protected. Osiris, meanwhile, ruled the afterlife eternally. Every funeral ritual, every tomb inscription, and every judgment scene in Egyptian art was rooted in this myth. To die was to follow Osiris. To live justly was to hope for his acceptance. The myth shaped law, morality, kingship, and the daily lives of ordinary people. This is why the story of Osiris, Isis, and the first betrayal was not just mythology. It was history in a symbolic form. It explained why Egypt valued loyalty over strength, ritual over violence, and balance over conquest. It explained why the Nile's cycles mattered, why death was not feared, and why order was seen as fragile but sacred. And perhaps most importantly, it explains why this myth survived for thousands of years. Empires fell, dynasties collapsed, foreign rulers came and went, but the story remained. Because as long as humans struggle with betrayal, loss, and the fight to restore balance, the myth of Osiris is never truly ancient. So the next time you hear the name Osiris, remember, this was not just the god who died. He was the reason the Egyptians believed life could continue after everything falls apart. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know in the comments. Do you think civilizations survive because they defeat chaos, or because they learn to live with it? And if you want more stories where myth, power, and history collide, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us in the next episode. Because some myths don't belong to the past, they belong to us.